What's up, and welcome back to the best of three. I'm Alvin, joined once again. I think that's how they say it.
Yep.
Joined again by Tori Hawkins. Got
What
my
up? What
people here
up?
with me. How you doing this on this fine Monday afternoon, my friend?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. The sun's sneaking out, so it's no longer Atlanta this time of the year, but it's definitely good to see the sun out, and especially this time of the year. Any sunshine is bonus.
Yeah, we get some free cheat days here in
Yep.
December in Atlanta, where we're still able to get out and coaches are still able to coach and players are still get some practice time in. So it's one of those sneaky little benefits of
Mhm.
stealing some nice weather here.
Ain't that the
Um,
truth?
yeah, yeah. I was just kind of we were talking about this before we hopped on, but I just got back from New Orleans. A good buddy of mine, you know him as well, had a wedding this weekend. So it's I remember it was nice walking around New Orleans. Weather was great. Get back to Atlanta yesterday, and it was colder. I was like, well, man, this is real winter.
Yep.
And then I
Yep.
and then I wake up this morning, and it's like, well, okay, we're gonna do 60s again. So,
Yep. Yep.
um, but yeah, good problems to have.
It seems like they want to remind us that it's the weather is that we take for granted, right? Is
Right.
something we should appreciate. So every once in a while, it'll do that to us. You know what I mean? So. Well,
Yeah,
I'm glad
yeah.
Jerome's a good brother. He's even though he's an OU fan, I'm still and I'm a KU fan. I'm still and that says a lot. So if we can be cool and he's from the other side of the border, buddy, that's a big it's a big ask. And hey,
That's
and
the
he brings it in spades. So I would 100%. He'd be on my very very short list of boys that are Boomer Sooner.
that's the border they don't talk about. They're always talking about
Exactly.
the OU Texas border, but the OU
Yeah.
Kansas border is pretty legit as well.
We go back, you got to keep in mind, I got a few years on you, but the basketball days, OU, and you heard it right here, I'm a big time KU fan. OU was a better basketball program in the 90s than KU, even though KU, that was in a sense KU's heyday.
That
You
was like
had
Danny Manning coming out of Danny Manning, going
Danny
into Paul
Manning's era,
Pierce,
going to
and
Bears and all those great years, but people forget Mookie Blaylock went to OU. People forget
oh, okay,
Stacey King went to OU. They had what's my main man? Uh, Wayman Tisdale went to OU. I mean, they had some players, man, that were just. There was one year KU lost both times, and this is back when it was still Big Eight. Lost both times in conference to OU, home and away. We're on opposite sides of the bracket. It was OU's tournament to win. Somehow, somebody beat OU and KU on opposite sides of the Final Four. Somehow OU gets beat. KU wins the national championship. We would not have beat OU. You heard it right here. We would not have beat OU. I mean,
was
they
that
just
the
I
which
can't
year was
remember.
that?
If memory serves, I want to say it was probably 92, 93 in that range, but I'm going to go back and check it. But it was early 90s. It might have even been 90 or 91. I mean, it was early 90s, but make no mistake, OU had our number. They were a better team. They were just a good. They were just. Well, you always had a really good. And of course the football was good. You remember how good Florida was in the 2000s when they had
Yeah,
the
yeah,
basketball and the football was good. OU was
yep.
that school back in the 90s, and this is before OU's kind of obviously went down. They ran the wishbone. This is before obviously the college football series or system, whatever they want to call it now. It OU was always top in the country, almost
Okay,
always, and they run
okay.
roughshod over everybody in the Big Eight. Colorado had a couple of years there with Cordell Stewart and
Hmm.
some other decent teams, but OU, by and large, was the absolute truth. So anyway, little known fact, some don't know. Guess who would have went to OU, who was from right down the street from Norman, Oklahoma? One Troy Aikman. Where did he want to go to school? OU. OU ran the wishbone. Oh, he
It's not
was
gonna work
never
out for
gonna
Troy
throw the
Aikman.
football. So Barry Switzer
Barry
gets on the
Switzer, yeah,
phone,
yeah.
calls a couple of his buddies, and says, "I've got a quarterback for you. The kid's gonna be bad. I'm telling you now. You're gonna thank me later. But we run the wishbone, and I'm not gonna change my whole system for this one kid. But this kid's gonna be good, like not good, like real good. Like you'll see him on TV one day, good." No one knew how good Troy Aikman was going to be. He put in to get Troy transferred. I want to see when to UCLA, if I'm not mistaken, but it went way, or maybe it was one of those Cali schools, if I'm not mistaken. He went out there, played, obviously Heisman Trophy winner later, and obviously the rest is history when he went to the Cowboys. But he is from Oklahoma. We're right down the street from Norman, Oklahoma. I mean, he was going to be
Interesting.
tried and true right there in OU. All we want to do is grow up was supposed to be a Boomer Sooner. So imagine what that would have done if they would have had a throwing quarterback. Now, that would have been another 3 or 4 championships right there, in addition to the ones they already had. So it's kind of funny when you look back at it. And I hate giving OU credit for anything. But make no mistake, this is, so tell Jerome, this is for you. You know what I mean? Hats off to your brother.
It's a joint wedding gift from both of us.
Just saying. The fact that I'm even going on about OU, I need to have my pulse checked. But just say it. Don't
That's
think
all right.
I don't.
I'll get it. I'll get us off. I'll get us off OU. I'll get us off OU. We don't need to give Jerome too much airtime here.
There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, just kind of we're back here today talking a little tennis as we do this time of week, and we had a really good conversation. I guess this is probably a couple episodes back when we were reviewing reviewing 2024, previewing 2025 on the men's side, and we touched on the kind of the current standing of the American men within the kind of quote unquote upper echelons of tennis right now. And I believe that conversation left us with you and I feeling a little different about where our top, let's say 5 or 6 American men stand right now, leaving 2024, coming into 2025. So I felt like it was a good idea for us to take some time and really, kind of sift through that today.
Yep.
And if we run out of time, because sometimes we get going, and these things get moving. But let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll cede the floor to you first because I feel like you have feelings.
I have feelings. In order to be the man, you have to beat the man. This isn't always the case, but 95% of the time. I know on the top of your list is Taylor Fritz. And let me say this because one of my absolute, and we're going to do an episode on this, one of my absolute pet peeves is how critical people tend to be, commentators especially, about tennis. Each one of these players are phenomenally better than anyone even knows. They are so good. If anything, I think the part of tennis that gets largely overlooked is how difficult the game is and how effortless the best can make it look.
Yeah.
Let me say that. With all that said, Chris Fowler is absolutely top on my list of one of the people that has helped kill tennis with his negativity. I absolutely don't like his condescension and other things. So let me say every comment I make has nothing but love for the players. I'm speaking as a fan, as a coach, as a lifelong tennis player, and it is my want for them to get better, to ascend to the top. And with that said, and I know a handful of them personally, love Francis. I mean, just a great kid. Met him several years ago before he really had his big run. Met him at Clemson, designated for kind of a small story. We'll talk about that one later. His girlfriend at the time was going to Clemson, and long story. We'll get to that one later. So I say this to Eubanks knows since he was a little kid, gave him 2 lessons when he was younger. Nothing but love for, as Chris would do, nothing but love for all these players. So let me say that first and foremost. Taylor Fritz, I think, had an opportunity a few years ago at Wimbledon to knock out, albeit an injured Nadal, to knock out an injured Nadal.
Yeah.
The Nadal one is very special one to me because that was when one of my players had a chance to knock out the death blow on him, was up some set points and whatnot. Match we won't talk about now. But I know he was vulnerable. He was for the taking that day. Taylor had him. Unfortunately, Taylor didn't close the deal. Nadal ends up winning that match, pulls out of the semi against Kyrgios. We talked about this before. I felt there was an opening for Taylor right then to break inside the top 5 legitimately, not points in ranking, not guys falling out. Elbow his way into the top 5 saying, I'm up in here.
Okay. So that's 2022. Taylor also
had a chance at that point to play a legitimate I'm for real match with Kyrgios, who I thought was having resurgency. I know he's coming back again. I hear all the rumors about him coming back. Great. But that match would have then set up a match with Novak. I felt like he stubbed his toe. Not to say he has no more chances, not to say that he can't, but going on a previous conversation about can you do it within 5, I feel like the window's more closing than it is opening for his championship level tennis. Can he do it? Of course. But like anything else, at this stage, it just gets harder, and there's just a few drops of blood in the water that he doesn't believe he can do it. With that said, I don't think Taylor Fritz has a championship, Grand Slam, mind you, in his outlook this year. And unfortunately, within the past 2 years, you've let Jannik Sinner and you've let Carlos ascend to the top, bypass him to some degree. And I feel like, and I'll let you respond, I feel like that's where we sit. Can he do it this year? No question. Does he have the game? No question. Will it be harder? No question. Your thoughts?
So that's interesting, right? So in 2022, if I remember this correctly, lost that match to Nadal at Wimbledon. Also beat Nadal at Indian Wells in the finals that year. So a few months prior to that, Nadal was hurt, had the injury coming into that thing, whatever. Taylor gets the win, wins a 1,000. That was his kind of, I guess, coming out party, right? So the interesting thing, I think, I have this personal theory of most players, you got to take these big threes and Serena out of it, these cyborgs, right? Most players have a 3-year kind of peak, right? Where they ascend, they hit their peak, they drop off a little bit, and then that's kind of where they settle.
I know where they settle.
Yeah, and so Taylor's been a top 10 player for 3 years in a row now, right? Kind of like 9, finished year like 9 in 2022, and then 10, and then now he's like somewhere around 4 or 5 this year. Went from quarterfinals of a slam to making finals of the U.S. Open this year, right? So you can kind of start to see what I call bottom level looks like. His baseline level is probably quarterfinals of a slam. He should be getting to the quarterfinals of a slam. The right draw lets him get into the semis plus a really good performance, and we're talking where he's playing in the last 2 days of a tournament. That's kind of what I expect out of him now. But I also believe that I agree with you in that 22 might have been his best chance. I'm not going to say to win one because he has a horrible record against Novak. Like that's not a match he's going to win. Not in that house. That's damn near Novak's house.
It's a bad. Wemby, of course, is Novak's. What house is it? Novak's house, number one.
Literally on one leg too. Like right. He can do it. He can do
the harsh reality of it is this is a tennis matchup now. Best returner of all time against the guy with the big serve. He's seen better servers and dismantled them. And Taylor's got a big forehand, which unfortunately goes to the backhand. Novak's helping this backhand. It's just rock, paper, scissors, and Novak's won. He's got purview in your brain of what you're going to do. You're putting out rock.
Right.
He's got paper. I mean, he's literally ahead of Taylor, unfortunately, in the matchup. Could it happen? It's possible, but it ain't likely.
Right. And maybe this year or next year is probably Taylor's best chance, as Novak is kind of like, he's about to he's hitting his twilight right now. But I think your rock, paper, scissors analogy is really poignant here, because that's the same thing I feel about Taylor matching up with, say, Jannik Sinner. Right. So 2022 is a perfect example. I was in New York a couple days before the Open started during the qualifying rounds, last day of qualifying. So that Friday, and I'm walking around watching some players practice. Right. One of the, if our listeners aren't aware, the Friday before the Open starts is quite possibly the best thing you can find in tennis. 100%. It's the best. 100%. I roll up there.
Big timers start coming through. You got the qualiers finishing up. You got everything. The old timers, the Masters guys walking around.
It was great. It was great. I saw Philippoussis walking around. I think he was on court with probably Tsitsipas at that point, practicing. And then I walked back and I watched Nadal practice for an hour. I watched Carlos practice for an hour. And then this is in Louis Armstrong. I'm right there. I'm 5 rows back. This is like, right. I can't afford that ticket.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But I love to watch these guys work. But I mentioned that because I went out to the outside courts and Taylor was hitting with Jannik, right? And Jannik hadn't become what he is now quite yet.
Right.
But I'm watching them go and I'm like, man, these guys look a lot alike. They're doing a lot of the same things, but
One's got a
It looks
backhand
like
that
one
just
doesn't.
all day.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so that's 2022, August 2022. Right now, you fast forward all the way to November of 2024, and I'm watching the final of the year-end championships, right? Center Fritz, and they did a really good job of getting low on the baseline for the feed on that one. And I'm watching, it's like watching a game of Pong. And it's just kind of inevitable. One of these Pong pieces just moves a little bit slower than the other one. And at some point, that Pong piece is going to get out of position and he's going to get behind. And it would happen consistently. And in my tennis brain, that just goes, okay, that's probably 4-4, 3-4 every time. Like it just the math doesn't math out on this one. But that's the ceiling, though, right? So
I will add to that.
Please.
As a coach, I've always used this, even when I was working with you back in the day. Hard to quantify this, but there's ball speed and foot speed.
Yeah. Yep.
Every player has their own, right? I've said some players were blessed because they did not have as much ball speed and it made their foot speed that much better. So therefore they were fast. By definition, ball speed here, foot speed here makes you fast. Ball speed a little better, you're still really quick, you're quick. Taylor Fritz has ball speed. He's not slow. He's a good athlete.
He's a good athlete.
But his ball speed is a tad bit higher. And at times you can get yourself hit out of your own coverage area. Yannick Sinner is at the perfect 45, 55 ball speed, foot speed. And he can handle anything you bring. I think for the listeners, Novak was the previous Ultra Mix of 40 and 60.
Yeah. Oh,
he
okay.
had 60 on the ball, on the foot speed, and 40 on ball speed, with the ability to use your pace. He counter some things. He got a nice serve. He had a good ball. He started coming to the net with some serve volley recently. He can hit a nice step up forehand and wrong foot you. Novak's never going to blitzkrieg you through the court. He's just never. That's just not his game, and it doesn't need to be. 24 Grand Slams. He's doing quite right.
He's doing it right. Whatever he's doing, he's doing it right.
Whatever he's doing, he's doing right. Taylor Fritz is that throwback. He's that better Roddick, if you will, that has a game. He has a better backhand. He's got a little, just a tad more right. I take nothing from Andy. Andy had everything. It's just a matter of him. Almost couldn't get in behind the serve. It was so big. Another example of ball speed and foot speed. Andy's a good athlete. Taylor might be as good, maybe a tad quicker than Andy around the court. Maybe even a tad taller. But I'm telling you, Alvin, problem comes to ball speed and foot speed. His ball speed's higher, and Yannick's isn't. And so when Yannick gets to that darn ball, Fritz maybe, and he's always tended to take that big forehand, you're taking risks. Every time you take a risk, you hit that inside out with a guy with a good backhand. We all know that from club level all the way to college. The down the line becomes open. Even if it's just to move you and open up your backhand, you are now in the matchup you don't want to be in. That is the rock, paper, scissors I get to. And I want to reference that because at some point, people can't always understand why is that guy better? Why is that? What are the matchups? The matchups in this case is just that. And I feel like those are things where we make it take that theme to the rest of the players you're going to talk about, from Ben Shelton to Tiafoe to Tommy Paul to any of to my main man Peter Korda. You start running Sebastian. You start understanding all of them have a similar coefficient, if you will, of that ball speed and foot speed. Some of it works well. Certain surfaces work well with others. Wimby, to me, aids the ball speed, foot speed, to a degree. If there's a surface for it to really be to its benefit, it's going to be on the grass. But man, and then surface for it not to, it's going to be the clay, right? So there's all these things where, and then we come into Australia. One reason why we talked about this before, Australia with Yannick Sinner uncertain with the whole doping situation. That's the big wild card because that could be a huge opportunity. Go ahead.
Okay, so his day in court will not occur before the Australian Open. It was set as early as I think it's something like as early as the 15th of February, but he's already not on the docket. Yeah, so it's like it won't happen until
he's running out the clock like 45, 47. Hey, you heard it right here. You heard it right here. That is unfortunate because if that's the case, he will play Australia. And unfortunately, in my opinion, he's the favorite in this situation. All if play is not interrupted. Now, I'll let you pick on to your next one. Thank you for that tidbit. I was not aware that the court date had been set.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Everybody
no,
in tennis should
it
be
had been
upset.
the date has been set they haven't established an actual date. It's just not to be
Right. Not
before
before. Right. Not before.
mid-February. Yeah. They're not before. It's
The
yeah.
old not
He's
before.
on the court docket. He's something like third on. So it's going to
Third
be a
on,
little
not
while.
before 1 o'clock. So, and your match is an early match, and you're like,
yeah.
Yep.
Come back later.
Yeah, come back later.
But you mentioned the kind of the similarities of the matchups and how the coefficient is very similar for all of our top American men. But the one that is, I think it's actually pretty straightforward for Tommy Paul.
100%.
And so I actually want to talk about him a little bit later. The one that I think has the ability to kind of throw everything in the mixer would be Ben Shelton, and not. And I don't know what camp I'm in when it comes to Ben, but I mean, obviously there's a lot of things to love. Like he's explosive as all get out, right? That serve is something special.
100%.
It never hurts being left-handed.
Yeah. Yep.
And all of a sudden, I feel like this year he started. I saw him play in Miami when I was down there in March or April, whatever it was, and he was playing maybe Musetti, I believe. And I'm watching him play, and I'm like, man, he's staying in rallies. He looks somewhat solid. Like the backhand is just kind of he's just like not making errors on the backhand side. Obviously, he's not hurting anybody, but he's just getting backhands cross court till he finds a short forehand somewhere in the middle, and then he's gonna try to turn on it, and then he likes to come forward. And it seems almost very. I hate to use another lefty comparison, but he's almost Rosetsky-ish.
Yep. I would agree with that.
Maybe even to use another weird comparison, maybe even like Tommy Haas a little bit. Like it's just solid back there. Maybe the Haas was a little far off, but
with the one in righty. But I think to your point, he is the difference between Rosetsky and Goran Ivanisevic to me. Goran's serve, people did not appreciate how big Goran's kick and his slice was incredible. He could carve you off and hit you flat out wide with the same toss, and you literally had nowhere to go. Holding was a matter of fact, and the only way you got off is if Goran missed a serve or two and got mad at Goran.
Right,
Not if you did something. Goran had that same unreal gene that Safin had that was like, buddy, you're lucky I'm fighting myself while I'm playing you. Otherwise, you'd be an afterthought. You know what I mean? And I say that with Ben. I think Ben, to me, Rosetsky comparison with the big serve, I think to morph him from where he is, and I know his dad, Brian, very well, and I remember when Ben was born, and so it's the same with his sister, Emma. The progression for Ben is to go from Rosetsky to Ivanisevic with his serve and to get solid with the back, and we just won't miss. Allow him to get back. He has got very good volleys, and the kid can actually hit the ball very well at the net.
Yeah.
In my opinion, he goes for too much, Alvin. He
too much
always wants to turn on the ball. He shouldn't have to turn on the ball. He should not have to turn on every single chance he gets. And I think that's the reason why it's a big sophomore slump. He's still trying to, pick the phone up and put the phone back down too many times instead of just being solid and letting the pressure. One thing I thought ended very well from 2003 on, he started letting you realize, I'm going to ride out this 30-15 point and just grind you. And then I'm going to crank up an ace, if not a second serve ace at 40-15. As opposed to getting back to 30 all for me pulling the trigger, missing a first and then having you on me and grinding me out to state and maybe go to 30-40. It's a big difference in the score. You got to play the score as a big server. I think Ben is too busy trying to turn on his ball, maybe drinking a little bit of his own, I don't say it badly, every young player does it, drinking his own Kool-Aid a little bit about how big his game is, how big the serve is. And sometimes when you win big, risking big, you kind of go to that a little bit like I can do it again. And in reality, you can, but you shouldn't have to. And I think at that point, he just needs to be able to it's such an easy thing to say. It's so hard to do. But I think if he just were to apply more pressure he would find himself using that big serve when he's a little looser, a little bigger target. And I, as a big server, back in the day, in the black and white days, I had a decent serve. And one of my players on my team at G State told me, and I never forgot this, sometimes the flat is so effective when you don't see it. And therefore, if I see it less, it stays big. If I see it often, I get a groove on it. I'm used to it. It's the easiest to return if you have hands, and it's the easiest serve to miss if your toss or timing is a little bit off. So it's a double loose. You better be hitting it big. You better hit it flat body a bunch of times just to back off, and then use that, because the guy's going to touch the ball early. Use that when your slicing kick have got the guy coming forward. I'm not here to talk tennis. His dad and him have got a great camp. I'm just talking. It seems to be a lot of risking in his game, and therefore not the same results. That's my point.
Do you think then that if for Ben to go from somewhere around 20 in the world, which is kind of around a 16-ish level at the majority of the slams, right, consistently, to move into top 10 in the world, one, let me ask this question.
And he was close there, if not right there.
2023. He had he was knocking on the door.
8 or 9 on the door. Was he 10, 11? Did he make top 10?
He did really well in the slams in 23. I think
and not so good at the others.
Yeah, not so good at the others. What quarterfinal in Australia maybe, and then the semifinal at the U.S. Open. But if he's able to calm his game down and almost do less, do you feel that there are 10 players in the world better than him?
It's a great question.
Even if he does it, is he a top 10 player?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Are there 10 better right now? Yes. Are there 10 if he calms down? He's one of the 10. I think there's 7. And I think one of them is Novak. I think Novak could be on that. This, in my opinion, could be his swan song year. I know he's going to try to play until he can't, but I think that Novak is also about to go through what I call the Nadal retirement, which means he's around, but he's only going to play 1 to 2, maybe 3 majors a year due to injuries, due to health, due to not being 100%. And let's face it, he's at the point, and he's earned it, where he's playing for Grand Slams. He's not playing for points, rankings, and such.
Yeah.
He will be around in every major period in the story. So, with that said, unfortunately, because of his round of 16/20 in the world status, he will run into Novak.
He'll get Novak early.
in the corners. So, unfortunately, will he ever get there without beating Novak? Not a chance. He'll be in one of those courts. He'll be in one of those draws, and he's going to run up against the Novak, the center, the Carlos, and such. I think he actually matched up very well with Carlos, ironically. Carlos blocks a lot of balls back on certain returns, and as quick as he is in lefty, Carlos stays back quite a bit. I think his game actually matches up well to Carlos. I also think that Yannick and Novak, horrible matchups, and I think he matches up to other Americans very well, including Tiafoe, and I think he would also match up very well against to Francis and to
Taylor.
Paul and Taylor. I think he would, because he sees those as his boys. There's no. And in his mind, on any given day, I can beat you straight up. Just watch me. And I like that bit of his game. If he were to have Taylor, unfortunately for Foe, that would be a situation where I would give Ben, if he's hot and he's calmed down, I would give him the edge, even though on paper they're ranked a tad high.
Okay, so then it turns into let's say for the next 3 years or so, then we're talking about like it's the Zverev, it's the Russian infantry, right? It's the Zverev, not Zverev, obviously he's German, but you've got Medvedev and you've got Rublev and you've got who else pops up in there? I think those two, Casper, de Minaur, like those are the guys kind of that are also in his, like they're all in their mid-20s. So do you believe that if he catches any of them in the quarterfinals or even round of 16 of a major, that
he's
if he
playing
calms
well,
down, he can move
100%,
past them.
100%. Mind you, a grind, plays well, and so on. And he to me is going to take a bit of a track like Boris Becker played. He's going to have a couple flashes. He's had his couple flashes, not to Boris's Grand Slam level, but it was a different era. I think, and then it didn't take Boris another 5 years to win. I think won the U.S. Open next. He had to develop the rest of his game. flashy, literally gunslinging. There were times Morris was hitting 2 first serves. I mean, just screw it, I'm gonna do it. And that was a lot about his confidence and his cojones, as they say. But he was just like, why not, right? And as you get older, you realize, why not? Because once you get broken, you're done. That's why,
Right.
and I think
Yeah.
that's one of those
Yeah.
things where I think Ben's learned that. I think his camp's going to get him right. I have utmost respect for Brian Shelton, his dad, and longtime coach, both here at Tech as well as at Florida. I think that's going to get through to him, and I think that Ben is a competitor, and I think that he won't want to be called that one and done or flash in the pan type of player. I think he's got all the goods. He stays healthy and stays hungry, he's going to be just fine. I actually like he's, in other words, your 3-year window you spoke to, I think he's got a 5-year window simply because he's so young and because the maturity
it's a
factor is there.
It's a 3-year peak, not a 3-year
Sure.
window. Which said I don't think he's there yet. I don't think he's hit his
100%.
3-year peak.
I don't think he's peaked. I really don't. I think
he's not climbing yet.
I think he's literally kind of overachieved for his start.
Right.
And I think that he is, you see what I'm saying? I think he overachieved, and perhaps that almost set up a bit of failure for the next year because he shot year 2 and year 1. You know what I mean? And
right.
really kind of caught a couple of nice draws and whatnot. So I say it to say he's someone I feel has a bright future. And that's not to say the others don't. I say it's a tad bit brighter because he overachieved, and he comes back this year hungrier and really, as you say, toned down, just not as risky, not as not using all of his tools just to get out of jams, but using them at times where he needs to really accentuate the point. I think he could do a nice job. I think the person we're not talking about when we need to is Francis Tiafoe. And I think personally, in my opinion, he might be on the last year and a half of that 3-year peak, if you will. And I say that because, ironically, because his matchup with Shelton a year or so ago, and he just hasn't seen as well as himself or been able to really compete at that level since. And I will dovetail that into Tommy Paul after you give me your thought.
Okay. So it's interesting that we've got Tommy, Taylor, and Francis, right? These are kind of the, obviously our 3 of our 4 highest ranked Americans. They're all about the same age, 27, 26, something like that.
Yep.
And they all came up together, right? I remember seeing these guys all hanging out with each other at Eddie Herr, maybe like 2014, something like that. I was down there.
Yep.
And they've been, they are the ones who, the next generation, the true generation has come in this together. I think the thing about Francis, and I tend to look at Francis and Taylor as kind of like 1A and 1B.
Okay.
I feel like Francis can spark his ceiling every once in a while and play a little bit outside of himself.
Okay.
To make you think he is a top 5 talent.
Okay.
But there's something that he doesn't have that won't allow him to do it over a long period of time, right? So we're talking about a long period of time can be a full season. A long period of time can be 2 weeks, right? The way we look at time in tennis is a little bit different. And that's what I think keeps him from consistently getting to, the back end of slams outside of the U.S. Open. Now, granted, he was playing some good ball at Wimbledon this year and just kind of ran into Carlos, but unfortunately, running into Carlos is kind of part of the deal, right? If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And I'm sorry if you lost to him at 2 Grand Slams, like this is in 5 sets. Like, well, you gotta win those matches. And maybe he's
to be considered.
I don't know that he wants it that badly.
Thank you, and that he made the matchup. The problem to me, Francis has phenomenal game outside of a major weapon. I know a lot of coaches may disagree. I think his grittiness, his heart, his fight is his weapon. I get all that. But at the end of the day, assuming the other player has the same grit and the same tenacity and the same hustle, well, then what else you bring to the table?
You got to go through them.
You got to go through them. And as I've told, you remember a few players I've told this to, they're not going to give it to you. You got to take it from them. And at some point, what does he have to take it from them? Which is why I think Ben has a slightly brighter future with that. And mind you, never count out a fighter like Francis. Never. Foe is going to always be a thorn in your side. And he's one of those players I think can play at least 35. Just because you told him he couldn't, I don't think he'll be a threat to win a slam at 35. I think he's got a window to win a slam or to be a consistent semi or better. I think that window's closing right now just due to everything from age to current levels game. But don't sleep. He's one of those kind of guys that if Novak were to get hurt and pull out of that side of the draw, his future and that draw all of a sudden becomes Francis. He knows how to win. I'm not saying this, and I'm going to dovetail on Tommy next. He knows how to win. And if you show weakness and the ability to not close him out, he's a player that you will never want to play on that day.
I think ironically, even though his best results have been at the U.S. Open, it's almost the Francis Tiafoe show, right? It's, the later he gets in the tournament, the more he becomes almost a different person, right?
He's a gamer. He plays to the crowd. He's energized from the crowd. They all come out to watch. He's a showman. He loves that. Relishes that.
I could see him randomly winning Wimbledon. That's the kind of it's not gonna happen at the U.S. Open. He's gonna mess around and almost accidentally win Wimbledon. Because I think
I could see your point, and don't get me wrong. If the draw turns right, no question, I agree with you.
I don't put anyone necessarily on grass smack, because grass favors athletes. I think that's the tricky thing about it. The ball doesn't come up. You gotta have strong hips, and you kind of need to. As they slow the grass down, almost it seems like every year, you don't really want to be all that tall, right?
Yep.
So
right.
As the serve becomes less and less of a weapon there, I just feel like it takes so much hand skills to do well on grass, his ability to kind of bump the ball around the court every once in a while.
100%. And low, to your point.
And low,
And a little wonky every once in a while. Top spin don't work well on the grass. You know what I mean?
Worthless.
Slices, drop shots, a little bit of flatness. I've always said that one of the best things about the grass is if you have kind of an awkward ball. I remember Marion Bartoli from years ago. Just a weird ball. Two on both sides. Her ball came off almost knuckleball. It was the hardest ball to handle on the grass because every bounce was different anyway. So Thompson almost gives you a little bit of feel to kind of handle this off. But the flatness and his backhand has that kind of herky-jerky kind of move and that launch kick to it. And that is great on grass. Almost lack of depth on hard court, but on grass. And he's quick enough and he reads so well. He'll get around on the point on you in a heartbeat. And yanking in front of you. He's looking at you and you didn't even know that he went. It's just one of those kind of things where he just has a real good ability to hold the ball and his shot just long enough for you to kind of commit and go somewhere else. A little bit of Francis' game. So it makes it fun to watch. He's to really adapt, his skills, to be able to strike when you least expect it to, because it is some of the big weapons. To your point, totally agree. Is it possible? Yes. Likely. He can go get some help. Let's put it like that way. He's going to need some help.
Yeah, I think that's the case at all the draws, though, and all of the slams. He's always going to need a little bit of help.
He's going to always need help. Should it break, he will be there. As the old line in Snatch. You're on thin ice, and I shall be under it when it breaks. So he's that player that's always lurking just underneath. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's playing up to form. Quarters will be a good accomplishment for him for the next, in my opinion, this next year's slams. Something happens, as it always does. I think he's the next back in the top 10 of your group, in my opinion, possibly even before Ben, because Ben's going to have to play to that point while he can turn it on quickly. Ben's going to have to play and get into that form. Francis is there. He just needs to know what's going
on. Okay. You briefly mentioned Tommy Paul before that, and I think we've had a ride with Tommy, right? One of our top juniors coming out.
100%.
In the world. Took some time to adjust to life as a professional tennis player, and I'll put it that way. Yep. But he is now here, right? He's he finished top 15 last 2 years, and he's starting to become somewhat of our metronome, right? He's there. He's there. Yep. What do you think it's going to take for Tommy, if he has it, to go from right behind Francis and Taylor to bumping into that conversation, as maybe even jumping in front of Francis, if we're both on the same page about Taylor's probably the one that's going to kind of be the perennial top 5, has the ability to do so.
Just end the game, let's be honest. And he has the game to do so. there are, I'm going to call them archetypes, prototypes. You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
you
yeah.
can choose the term in this case. The Casper Ruud was our last one in the on the men's side. It goes back to Leighton Hewitt in the early 2000s. You could even take it back to the Max Wielander types as his prototype back in
Hmm.
the late 80s, early 90s, or mid 80s, I should say. You can look in the women's game, right? It was Caroline Wozniacki. It was the who's another just a player that is just Iga is the ultimate version of this, unfortunately, for right now, and has taken on all four cylinders. But it's just that player that Hingis was more to my point of this kind of player. Just always was 95% accuracy on everything. Tough to play, tough to beat, never misses returns. Not a lot to beat you with, but will not miss a ball. I think your girl Zhang, how do I say her first name? The Chinese young lady is the left. Zhang Shenwen. She is however, I always have a hard time saying her name. She is that player now on the women's game to me. She just doesn't miss balls. And you go out there, it is an emotional grind. It is a match. You know they're not going to give you anything. I just don't know if Tommy can beat some of those players who have the firepower to go through him at certain times with the bigger serve. And if you work that hard, if you can protect your serve, and you can then get the break, Tommy doesn't have a ton to beat you with. Now, here's the thing. For the top 20 and below, he's deaf. You see him in the draw, like, oh, well, there you go. Let's start looking at flights. If you are one of those top 5 or top 10 players, you know he can be beaten. You know you have the goods to get through. You know you can hold serve. And I just think it's one of those games where, to me, the final he had 2 years ago in Australia, obviously I know he's had some good results in this past year. This will be a year for him to clean up at the 1000s. This will be a year for him to clean up on the 500s, really get his points up there quite a bit, and just be a threat with his seeding and his points to be top 5, top 6, top 10 in the seeds, to let his seeding help him through the draws. And that way he won't face the Novak, Carlos, and Yannick early. And that way that can help him, mathematically get to a quarter, maybe walk into a semi when those has a bad day. I still feel, and I love Carlos. Carlos has the most up and down game. And the reason I represent that with Tommy Paul, Tommy's in that half of the draw. Tommy will take care of Carlos's draw. Make no mistake. He will ride that draw in as if it's his draw. And
Right.
he's one of those
Yeah.
kind of players. I mean, I could see Carlos winning it. I could see him having a just get a little crazy, and he can lose to a guy, a qualifier. He has that kind of volatility still, and he's still young. And I think it's one of those kind of situations where Tommy's that player. You mentioned Tiafoe needs some help. Sorry, Tiafoe needs some help in the draw to get to that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Tommy's already there. He needs help to get to the semi or to the final with one of those guys going down. And if one of those guys went down, and the guys, Zverev is a bad day. And I think every year going forward, he is a little bit of a, if he's not in it to win it mentally, he could cash in his chips and get a little frustrated and be pissed off that he's not playing the tennis he thinks he needs to get that level. Rublev's another one who I think he's kind of at the mentally may not be 100% good with where he's at. I read an article the other day about a player retiring at 26. It was your boy Robin Soderling. And some of those players that are retiring early.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I'm like, these guys remind me of these guys that might just cash in their chips at 28, 29, or 30 and 31. They've made their money. They're legends back home. They know they're probably not going to win one if Novak and those guys win. They're going to give it a year or two. But
That's an interesting. It's an interesting thought.
You let a knee surgery, or you let a waning. I think they've been keeping it under wraps for a while. These guys aren't an adult. They don't have this kind of grit. They're not going to go through two knee surgeries and two surgeries and come back out and try to win one. And they haven't won one yet. Nah. They're gonna come out and be. And I looked at Harrison Butker. I'm a Chiefs fan. That leg ain't right. It just ain't. It ain't right. And so now, instead of a guy who's been a top player at his level, comparing it to football, these guys may not be the same. You need two good legs in tennis. Something goes down, a knee, a hip, something. What's your point?
I don't know. I was just kind of thinking about that. Like, okay, these guys are all in that. You can even put Tsitsipas into this group, right? These
I would
guys are in the in the
100%
in
put
the
the best in there.
26 to 28 years old age range. Like, they're not, they're not next gen anymore, and they're not old yet. But in 2 years, right? We're not talking 26 to 28. We're talking about 28 to 30. They've been at it for 11 years on tour. Take Djokovic and Nadal out as these anomalies of guys who are playing into their mid 30s and
Yep.
playing at a very high
Yep.
level. Like, what does that look? Does at some point? I mean, they made a lot more money than they need. I could see someone like Sebastian going, you know what? I'm out. Mental health. I'm gone.
And
I'm done.
that's a tournament that Tommy Paul will win. And I think Tommy will play that long. I think he and Paul both have this kind of, I'm going to win one before you. I promise I'll win one before you. And they had this kind of, I don't care if it's the cafeteria at the USGA training, sit down at Lake Nona, or their conversation, on the phone later. They just had this running thing. I think that Taylor's right there with them. I think they're probably the most of the two. Taylor, to me, as the most prolific game. And I think because of that, again, so when they stay injury free and they're the sun, moon, the stars line up for their health, I think those two could have another 3 to 4 years absolute relevancy. And then once you get past 30, you're playing against the time too. And at that point, it could be something different. But I think the reason I reference older players is because they're getting that much closer to that father time window, and they're getting that much closer to top injury. Unfortunately, you don't ever wish it on anybody, but let's face it, the older you get, the more wear and tear on the body you get, and for the lack of, it's just going to happen. Somebody's matter of who, what point, who's on the other side of that drop benefiting from that and allowing themselves to walk into that possibly anything could happen kind of a moment. As I said, no one wants to sign up to play Tommy in a match, even if it's just because he's going to play you 5 sets before your next match, you know what I mean? And drain your juice. I just feel like all three of them are great. Talking about Taylor, Tommy, and Francis, they all have different ways to beat you. But I feel like each of them a little different too. I feel like Tommy is just right there. He needs one or two of the big ones to not come. And then he needs, and where Francis needs help in the draw to get past the quarter, I think he's a shoe-in to get to most quarters. He's just that good and that solid. He just needs one of them to get to bow out or have an upset to allow him to get back to his ranking form from 2 years ago.
Okay. Let me put this to you. All right. I think this is kind of where we fall on different sides of the argument here. We spent the last 45 some odd minutes talking about Tommy Paul and Taylor Fritz and Francis Tiafoe and Ben Shelton. We got 4. I mean, let's just look at these 3. Let's take Ben out of it, and even Sebi Korda, who's finished the year ranked 22, right?
Yeah, my personal favorite, by the way. I love the kid's game. I just love watching him.
Okay. Actually, before I ask my question, then let me ask you about Seb Korda. What is it about his game that everyone loves, yet he hasn't been able to do much with it yet?
And I don't know if when you say do much in terms of winning a slam, I don't know if he will.
Not even winning a slam, just living up to the expectations that, not the expectations, but like people love his game. He's like that dude. He's
100%.
Almost, everyone's like, oh, he's so smooth. Oh, he's got the great game. And I've seen him up close in person. I too think he's, he looks like he should have all the things. So what is the thing that he's missing?
Yeah. I've always felt that kids of players always have the weight of the world. And you heard it right here. Peter Korda, heck of a player. Him winning that not only gave Sebi the name, the lifestyle, and the leg up, it also is its own kryptonite.
Yeah.
It just is, man. I remember talking to Trent Bride, one of our players, and when he was playing some with Sebi, and they were playing this little game of bounce down. But we were at the Tulsa, the B1 ITF at the same time. They were there together. Right after I talked to you, they went on the court. They were playing the little game of bounce down and whatnot. Just something stupid, waiting for a court to open up. And I remember Sebi, within about 3 minutes of the game, figured out how to play the game. And Alvin, I've never seen anybody do a behind the back, not looking bounce down. Not only is it hard to do, but he did it because he kind of figured it out. He kind of realized at first he did it with a little hop and kind of went behind, and then he started doing behind the back drop shots, and then he went deep in the short. And I said, you know what Trent's answer was, and I love Trent. Trent says, it's that tennis royalty in your blood. You just have it, right? And I'm laughing. I'm like, what if the kid just adjusts that fast? What if the kid just has that good a hand-eye, right? You can make an argument on why he has it, or what if he just has it, right? That's the smoothness you speak to. Now, I think, ironic to Trent's point, I think the tennis royalty is what curses it. It's the I should be doing this. I've got 2 sisters that are the top of the LPGA.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
One in particular, you know, and doing swimsuit, you know, getting the endorsements right now. And
Nellie's killing it.
Right. No, and I'm grinding out. I'm still made it to a semi. You know what I mean? So there's all of that. That's a tough hustle. Can you imagine being over there? Can you pass some potatoes? No. Win one first. You know what I mean? Get your own potatoes. You know what I mean? I mean, that's
getting the single digits in the world to make it talk.
Right. I mean, that's a tough family right there. I said to say that to me is what's still killing him. He needs to let it go. He needs to move on. He needs to say, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna have a great time out here. We all, you know what I mean? And I'm gonna play tennis my way. And I think once he plays free and which is hard to do. Obviously, you come to that every day. And the comparisons, once he starts doing well, what are they gonna do? We'll compare more, you know what I mean, to Peter and the whole family and this and that, as if he finally figured it out. And in reality, it's each player's journey. But that's my own thing. I don't want to take up too much time with Sebi and hope he stays healthy. His thing to me is going to be staying healthy.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if he can do that, again, other players didn't have a ton of weapons, but he's so fun to watch. You gave me a bunch of matches in the middle of the day when all the big timers aren't playing and they're trying to get them in on early matches and late matches, and you got a chance to watch Sebastian Korda. Go by, get yourself some food, and get as best seat as you can, and just sit behind the kid and just watch him work. He is an artist. The tennis racket's a paintbrush in his hand, and it's just to me, it's a nice way to watch the better part of 2 hours in the afternoon, and just watching him try to think on his level as you're watching him hit certain shots, and it's just beautiful to watch. So anyway. Move on.
So I mean, we can kind of like, as far as putting a bow on it, right? We've got 5 American men in the top, let's call it 25 in the world, right?
Yeah. Yep.
No other country has more than 3. I mean, Italy's got 2, right? Russia's got 3.
Yep.
So why is that not enough? I would say I would say that you could say we're the best country for producing male tennis players right now.
Hats off to the UST and all they've done.
Why is that not enough?
Hats off to all the coaches that have done it and been doing it for a long time. Hats off to all the Delma coaches, 2.0, 3.0 versions of me and guys that have really done it and kept going. I think these guys have done a phenomenal job. Why is it not enough? Well, why is it never enough? That's our culture, unfortunately. And I feel like with the history and the precedent that our former American players have put down, unfortunately, all we talk about is ships. And so if you're not talking about a ship at the end of the day, it's to me still not enough. Do I think they've given their players a chance to be in that conversation? Yes. Do I think any of these players this year are a legitimate threat with current staff and current players in the mix to win a Grand Slam? I do not. I think there's too many current champions that they have to go through to do so.
Right.
And I think that it's just going to be a tough thing. And none of their game, with the exception of Taylor, has the kind of game to go through. And he, in particular, happens to have the highest, loss of the win-loss column against those same top 3 or 4 players. So I think that's where it's just a tough thing to call. Do I think there's another one coming? Now, there's a tough question for you. I do not. And that's why we should relish these handful of players coming up. I think these guys are doing a phenomenal job. I wish that we had another young Andy Roddick coming up to boost up behind Taylor. I wish we had 4 more Francis Tiafoes. I wish we had 8 Tommy Pauls that were just showing themselves to be phenomenal players. And unfortunately, you appreciate how good somebody is when you look at who's behind them, and the rear view looks really distant. So that's why not enough. because that's our culture. We expect more. Why is it more than people understand and appreciate? Because to your point, no other country's doing it. We do have the most number of players to some degree. We have a lot of resources. I recall France, and they're always my go-to for the top developing country, because France is, in my opinion, a little bit bigger than Texas, give or take. I know I'm
Right.
spitballing that. It could be right. I'm just saying, if I had to look overall area, obviously the population is much higher. But if I had to look at the country versus our country and the size and the athletes, mind you, they're getting, as you call it, my main man, GMP and other players, they're getting all the top athletes, and they're still stealing some from Cameroon. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like our top players are still being pulled. We don't want to get in this conversation per se, but that's also something you have to put you got to put the perspective on it. You know what I mean? You look at these players every Saturday playing college football, and you look at that kid that there are 33 players that are second string that are phenomenal athletes, and if they had a record for 10 years, perhaps could be that next wave, right? There are 33 of them. There's 66 guys on the team. There's 33 of these guys that are second string that might be phenomenal, and with hand-eye and athleticism, if we gave them a chance. And we're talking from all the schools. We're not even talking just the top. So I say that to say I think it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate cultural thing. It's an unfortunate lack of appreciation. And I won't get into all the reasons why tennis has not. But I think we're still, in my opinion, if you put those same four players, Taylor, Tommy, Francis, Ben, and you put them in the combine, okay? Combine, not combine to become a pro. There may not be an event that they win. Okay? Some of these guys may not even get drafted.
I mean,
yet
Tommy,
they're better athletes. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I just have to put that in perspective to say it's not that they're overachieving. I feel like the country's overachieving with all we're putting in. But the biggest thing, the bigger argument, casual, argument with Patrick Macron about this, and he says, John said the same thing. What's on that? So we're going back and forth. But I said, when she was head of playing many years ago, I was like, get me, you want the best chicken salad, start with the best chicken. And I go back and forth on that. And that's another episode, perhaps. But to me, it's still what we're doing. And that's why we don't have a true, I'm going to say, phenomenal athlete. I feel like Australia somehow mixed with the Frankenstein laboratory and literally the kid curios and said, look, son, you're going to play tennis. I don't care what you say, and in the next 10 years, you know what you want to do. And at that point, I feel like that was kind of what it was. Ironically, Mark Stafford said he wanted to play hockey. And Mom said, nope, you're playing tennis. And so there was a whole funny article about him. He didn't want to play tennis. The tennis world is grateful he did, because the guy was so unbelievably great, and he may have been just an average. We don't know. But I said to say, give me 5 more, give me 10 more who are probably get more so. I think you now have 15, 20 guys in the top 50. And then at that point, you definitely have a number one. And one of them, I guarantee, will be a new, that's just a tad bit more something in the tank. Hand-eye, athleticism, size, something. Alvin, GMP 6'9", 6'8". I mean, come on.
Well,
Tommy's 5'8", 5'9". Is he 5'10"?
Tommy's close to 6 foot. Somewhere in there.
5'10",
Yeah.
Just saying.
I do think that the athleticism thing could be a tad bit overvalued, and we can get into a little bit deeper on another episode. But I do feel like there is a point of diminishing returns when we're talking about athleticism in tennis, because the size of the court ain't changing, right? Like you need to be athletic enough, right? Now you would say that all these guys are athletic enough, but more athleticism does not mean more results, right? At some point,
I would
you
agree
need
with
enough
that.
athleticism to get to a certain level, and then the other things that you mentioned, right? It's the hand-eye coordination, it's the ability to think well on one's feet. Like if you take some things from Francis and you put them in Taylor's frame, right? Now maybe we got what we need now, right?
I could not agree. Answer me this one question. I know we got to move on to the girls. Is there a number one in the last 20 years that was not a great athlete?
No, I mean, well, I mean, you could you could get real in the weeds about this. I mean, Medvedev did hit number one for like 2 weeks, and he's not the greatest athlete. He moves quite well for his size, but you know, it's the best movers are the best tennis players, right? There's certain levels of I think there are certain variables of what we would consider to be athleticism that don't actually show up in tennis, right? Like the vertical plane isn't one that we deal with much in tennis, right? It's all
smart tests we have for tennis will be
right.
much different than for we agree on that.
Exactly. So
Roger Federer was a top badminton player and soccer player in Switzerland before he also played tennis. The parents actually wanted him to stay well-rounded and focus all on tennis. He chose to play tennis, and the world's better for it. The Rafael Nadal, right, would have played pro soccer. We know that. He had the speed, the hands, the wheels. He wanted to play tennis. And Uncle Tony wanted to play tennis. I think they're one of their families is connected with one of the top pro teams there in Barcelona. He wanted to play tennis. Tony, tennis player, put it and made him be left-handed in all things. Yannick Sinner was a world championship skier. Right, I won some big game, or I don't know if it was Olympics, but whatever level. The kid was an athlete in another sport level with the gold. And now it comes over to tennis. I just say these things to say Novak. I mean, we don't have to talk about the guy does things and no one's ever seen on a tennis court, from splits to everything else. The guy when he does his block and then start engineering a player to be as good as Novak. Yeah. That being said, I'm just saying if you put the absolute of the athletic components, pick the components you want. I'm telling you, our players are just not at that. They're not at that 99.9 percentile in my opinion. Are they 95 and better? 1,000%. That 99, buddy, that's a.
I mean, you could even use the eye test and say it comes down to fluidity of movement. Like, does your right foot have the same capabilities of your left foot, and does your right hand have the same capabilities as your left hand? Like, are you perfectly in balance? Not just your body, but when your body moves, do you ever look out of balance? And I would say that all the players that have ever been ranked number one in the last 20 years never look out of balance. All the players that we talked about here all look a little less than when it comes to movement in some way, shape, or form. Like Francis is fast as all get out, but he's stiff as a board sometimes.
Yeah.
Taylor's ability to move around the court, not just laterally, but like high ball, low ball, forward, back.
If he ain't dictating play, the great Paul Fortunato used to say the term El Dorado, because that's how some people move versus a Porsche or a Ferrari.
Right.
They move like an old Cadillac Eldorado.
That's a good one. Oh, Fortunato. Jeez, I haven't heard that name in forever. I'm going to put this to you. You take Taylor Fritz, Tommy, Francis, Ben. We can even put 7 there. That is the current order year in rankings this year. I believe that order does not change this time next year. What say you?
I think all of it changes. I think one of them stubs their toe and the other two move up, and I think Seb moves up if he's healthy. And I think each of them could be this year, especially with some volatility with center and all the whole court case, could be top 25. Primarily because if one of them does it, I think the other 3 will all believe they can and should. That's what I believe.
We've got one in the top 10 right now. Do we end up with more than one next year?
Tough call. I think with volatility, yes, 2, and right at 10. I think without that volatility, maybe one moves in, maybe one moves out, but they're all right there, stair step. And I think it could be one of those kind of situations. Do I hope? Yes. Do I think it's likely? Hard to say. But I do think each of them moves up a number. The 2 biggest movers to me being Sebi and Ben Shelton. I think they just have the most upside to go. I think Francis and Taylor have a lot of points to defend, and I think it's going to be a tough year for them in that regard. So that's why I'm saying it could be tough. And sometimes you look at some of those good finishes, Taylor in particular, it's going to be tough for him to do what he did this year again. and he's going to need a great Australia and some other things to really kick it in gear. To start his defend of his points this next year. Can he do it? 1,000%. Is it going to be hard? 1,000%. But I think that's why I say he could be the quickest to fall out of that top 10 because his current points come off a phenomenal year ranking wise. No different than Tommy 2 years ago when he got to the semis or whatever of Australia. You know what I mean? It was semi or final? What was it? 2 years ago.
Yeah.
What wasn't the final?
Tommy Simic. I was actually at the match that he beat Ben Shelton.
Ben,
I was there.
Ben quartered, right? Ben quartered, and it got
he beat Tommy beat him in the semi.
Coming off that semi, I don't think Tommy had near that year in 2023, and this year he's done better again. It's hard. The slams are hard to defend, man. They are hard to defend. I mean, you're a match or two and playing some great tennis and huge points and huge money, and man, that's 3 tournaments worth of points. You know what I mean? That you're having to defend in 2 matches. You know what I mean? In a large degree. So again, I just think it's gonna be it'll be a tough thing for him too. Should he do it, he'll be great. Then I said that's how we can get to. I see it more likely for him kind of popping out and Tommy maybe slipping in there, and obviously and Shelton could get hot for 2 weeks for sure, and have the ability to rack up those points at a slam, even though he hasn't had some of the same results as some of the 1,000s and some of the other longer, what I call more the true test of a player's, consistency throughout the year. He's certainly a grand slam, play big when it counts, kind of a player. And I think those 2 could be the 2 biggest contesting in the top 10. And again, Sebastian and Ben could be the 2 biggest movers, I think, this next year, in my opinion.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Torrey, I'm going to leave you with that. That was
Sounds
fun.
Good.
We will, I think we're going to have a good time when we get a chance to work through the current state of the American women on the WTA side, because it's exciting stuff over there right now.
So exciting, and so many more young players up and coming, and man, and Australia has stayed true to form, with Australia being that upset tournament for the women's game. So this could be a great event. Really looking forward to a lot of them, and now they're starting to. The only bad thing is so many of them, they're going to start playing each other at some point, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only downside.
All right. Well, if you thank you guys for joining us, and if you're still rocking with us, make sure you do the thing, the like, follow, subscribe. I'll get it down one of these days. I will. I'm not a robot. Torrey, again, thank you, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Looking forward to it. Peace.